He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the most super intelligent power and force of love and creation possible forever. What's happening? I think that was Joe Moore. Yes, peace and respect, Benton and chat. Hopefully we are being heard. The StreamYard free 20 hours is up. Uh, Scheduling streams in YouTube doesn't work the best, and uh, I don't know how to get the microphone on my Bluetooth speakers, my Bluetooth AirPods to work. And I'm not seeking advice, being a former techie, and I also know how to Google things. It's probably not resolvable, um, and that's okay. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to Replay Crew. It is what it is. I have been scheduling the streams a day beforehand. Chose not to today or yesterday in order to see if a bathroom break, a early morning bathroom break would occur. That's not happened. I'm avoiding the TMI, but maybe the body is reconfiguring the scheduling to occur later in the day, which would be much more convenient for all of us, certainly. Um, I trust that everyone's well, which is different than hoping, right? Trusting, the yin form, accepting, and passive, right? Oh my gosh, passive? We're all trained to be assertive, aggressive, and dominant. What do you mean passive? Well, let me ask you a question. How is the being going to assertively and aggressively dominate the receiving of healing? Does that make sense to anybody? Or is it assertion, aggression, and dominance blocking the receiving of the healing? Um, somewhat counterintuitive, is it then necessary to remove or unblock any blockages within the being that are preventing the being from receiving great healing? And I know, Benton knows from experience, there's healing built into the body. Again, within this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, in a world of death via games of lies, and a world that exists at the level of delusion with elements of waking dream, surrealistic unreality. So now that that's all out of the way, certainly, um, may very well be revisited at some point in the stream, most likely. We've had our yerba mate and our dark chocolate. Hopefully, we're caffeinated and theobromined enough to do a live stream. No notes to work from other than what may have been left uncovered yesterday, perhaps. And I heard tale of a prominent figure in the so-called truth community had apparently gone through some health woes, um, trying to do this without mentioning any names. And Benton's thoughts, of course, were to his own chronic illness, his own, um, being very, very, very ill every day for quite an extended period of time. And one of the benefits slash drawbacks, and again, some of this is going to be TMI and gross, but there's really nothing to be done. Uh, you know, Driving a big rig involves urinating in bottles, whether folks like that or not. Whatever's available on the shelves of the stores and, Amazon products and all of this. That involves truck drivers peeing into bottles somewhere. Well, here in the car, same thing. But the advantage is to, over time, observe the color of the urine. And there's a lot of clues around the health of the organs. And I don't just mean hydration. I think a lot of us are trained to look at a hydration chart. The reality is, with a lot of these, and this is not medical advice, this is all for entertainment purposes only. I'm not a physician. Seek medical advice, of course. Um, Not that I did so. Benton is able to speak to his experience. Benton don't believe in seeking medical treatment because the medical system is set up for medical coding and billing, being a business just like everything else in the realm. Um, so the point Benton wants to make with respect to receiving healing, unblocking healing, is within the last, I don't know, month, 6 weeks, 2 months, uh, after many, many, many years of discolored urine from various health woes, the urine is yellow once again. And I mean the proper shade of yellow, right? Uh, yes. So, what a blessing, and certainly a part of Benton's testimony. And again, this is not something asserted as far as, hey, I need people to be like me. All religion is demonic. Benton's not a Christian. It's interesting how many disclaimers need to be given, but part of Benton's testimony is continuing to receive healing in the name of the Lord Christ Jesus, right? Who, in the story of the Bible, again, feel free to, it's all a delusion anyway, folks. What's the difference? And I don't mean that, I want to be clear, not with respect to what Benton holds to be true within himself and experiences within himself at the level of truth. I'm speaking to the externalities, right? What was spoken on yesterday at the level of power, accessing power within versus the disempowerment, the external disempowerment. Okay, so the external is a delusion anyway. So the story of Jesus, all the historical Jesus, all of these stories of the Bible, what is the relevance in a world of death and everything traceable to this world? Everything that can trace its origins to this place, including the Bible itself, is dead by nature, right? Animated death, as we've spoken about. So, in my view, no reason to get one's panties in a bunch. Not a fan of that phrasing. Or work oneself into a tizzy, right? What is the use of this? But yeah, that's certainly Benton's testimony. Healed in the name of the Lord Christ Jesus. Also delivered from wicked spirits, unclean spirits, and demonic spirits. And again, continuing to receive the healing. Certainly committed oneself, the being committed himself, in this case, Benton, going third person, to taking it very seriously, the chronically ill condition. No denial, right? And again, the common sense, the conventional wisdom, right? The word of mouthing of everything. If I went out and spoke to people, if I went away from my own source of power within myself and I went into externalities, again, if I went into the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions and then begin to, liaison with my fellow humans, there's going to be a lot of, oh, you'll be back to normal in no time. Oh, go to the doctors, they'll, medicate you and fix you right up. Well, the reality is what they would have done is ruined, in the long term, Benton's quality of life. Benton, 4 to 5 years later now, not completely, well, back to normal compared to whatever the situation would have been, years ago, certainly. But I would say 85% healed at this point and still receiving healing. But what seemed to be required, and some of this might hopefully be apropos to the unblocking of the healing, was taking it very, very, very seriously mentally. And when speaking about the power within, disempowered externally, empowered internally, well, a lot of that is, Benton here was born with, perhaps more mental fortitude than the average, more discipline than the average. But then all of that comes with its own drawbacks. Here's your undiagnosed fake autism, your neurodivergence, your affliction, to be afflicted with the odd manner. All of these things that the people who fetishize some of Benton's abilities mostly lack, right? They don't experience the neurodivergence. Growing up in the Mississippi River Delta region of America, right, in the 80s, and I mean all of the 80s, right? In fact, yeah, the entire, I was 5 years old in 1980, 4 or 5 years old. In the 90s, growing up in this environment, zero autistic people, right? Although I clearly went to school with an autistic person. And maybe he was diagnosed with autism, and nobody ever really knew what was officially wrong with him because there was zero mentions of the word autism. So is it possible that back then, in a community, not a large community, but not a tiny one either, what was the city limits? 50,000-ish, which for Arkansas, that was actually a sizable city, believe it or not, especially back then. I know it sounds crazy. However, is it possible? So to actually that just nobody had autism. So to grow up with all of that, something that would not have been understood, but then simultaneously just accepted for my behavior, as long as the behavior was able to conform, at least enough to sit in the chair to prove suitability to eventually at some point in the future serve corporations, because as we know, that's what this place is all about. Uh, Enslavement to corporations. And that's not what it's all about, but that's a big part of what's going on here. So back to the healing, Benton found it necessary to take this as seriously as possible because, again, to go into the external and to speak to people and to follow the conventional wisdom, there's 0% chance of Benton sitting here with a quality of life mostly healed. What the medical system would have done was put Benton through a process of medical coding and billing involving kidney dialysis, maybe a Whipple procedure on the old pancreas, right? Get in there and just auger out the various pathways of the pancreas. And then if that doesn't work out, just take the fucker out entirely. And just now it's a life lived on digestive enzymes, right? Um, I'm pretty sure my organs are there for a reason. Let's not take them out. Same thing with the gallbladder. Um, Developed gallbladder issues over 15 years ago, still have my gallbladder. And the fact is, most people, again, this is opinion, none of this is medical advice, this is Benton's opinion. I believe, and especially based on my own experience, that the vast majority of everybody who has their gallbladder removed, if they could make lifestyle changes and if they could receive healing, would still have gallbladders that are absolutely necessary. Now, what fucks up the gallbladder, in my opinion, what fucks up the gallbladder is all the fucked up fats. Okay, it's not the amount of fats, although that's a factor as well, in my opinion. Again, this is opinion. This is speaking to Benton's own experience. That's how we don't get around. That's how we maintain terms of service here on YouTube. I am able to speak to my own experience and then give my opinions on things, non-medically, as a non-expert. But yes, the old gallbladder is very necessary to digestion. This is very important. And in fact, many, many, many vitamins are what? Fat soluble. Some are water soluble, many are fat soluble. What does bile do? It has a lot to do with detoxification, and it has a lot to do with the breakdown of lipids in order to absorb the fat soluble nutrients, among other things, right? There's also a detergent effect there. And old Benton here studied up on this, already had some knowledge, thankfully, had some pre-existing knowledge because of earlier health woes around gallbladder stones and such, gallstones. And what does medical science do? Oh, look, you have gallstones. We're taking out your gallbladder. Well, what they're doing is removing the gallstones by removing where the gallstones are located. Meanwhile, a person with no gallbladder can still develop stones in their in their liver. So it doesn't even necessarily get rid of the problem in the first place. And many, many, many of these conditions are reversible, lest we forget. Um, so yeah, there's all of those things. So back to unblocking of the healing, and there was some confusion around Benton doing live streams while also declaring that he was actively dying. Well, to look at Benton and look at his body weight, that at a legitimate 5'10", meaning no shoes, and we're at the doctor's office with that thing that measures your height, 5'10.5" every single time. Maybe even taller now with the daily hanging. Maybe we've stretched out another half inch, perhaps. Um, but then, as we know with dating in the condition that it is, and dating apps and all of this, if I just say I'm 5'10", who's going to believe me, right? They're like, yeah, sure you are. He's 5'8", because now at this point, society's become so corrupt and everyone knows how to lie. It's just like, well, if somebody says they're 5'10", they're probably 5'7". It's like, no, I'm 5'10". And I got down to maybe lower, but the lowest I saw on the scale was around 102, 105, somewhere in there. Meanwhile, I was very thin. I remember being quite thin when I graduated high school at 135 pounds. An athletic, scrawny 135. Right. Um, so yeah, take 30 pounds off of a guy that was, you know, made fun of for how thin his upper body was, and, skeletal, right, in places. So that guy minus 30 pounds. And, looking at the scale going down, thinking, wow, what happens when I hit if I hit the double digits? And just assuming that was going to happen. Because mentally, to listen to what other folks would say, oh, well, everything's going to be fine. Have you gone to the doctor yet? Get your diagnosis, get your meds, get on dialysis, right? Well, there's no need for dialysis, and a lot of folks go on dialysis and never come off of dialysis. And old Benton here would rather not live than live a life involved with 2 to 3 trips a week to kidney dialysis. Not interested, just simply not interested. And I understand many folks find that baffling. Hey, I've lived my life. This is a life lived. Okay. Um, you know, Wild man status, right? Old Benton here squeezed a lot of living into, especially the early life, maximum fun, maximum socializing. We had a blast, you know, um, especially up until about age 35, and then embarked upon traveling the country, living out of a backpack for 10 years or so, 6 consecutive years at a stretch. I've packed a lot of living into these 50 years now, right? And having unlocked the achievement within the game of true knowledge of self at this point, and understanding the nature of the realm, what's left really. Well, I don't know, and life's interesting. I do have old Benton here's got the beautiful mind, so that's interesting. Whatever's going on between the ears and the noggin, that's always interesting, certainly. Beyond that, um, pleasure seeking, that's pretty much over with. Many, many years, trapped in lust and all of these things, and, just having a good time, that's all gone. Little to no thought of any of that. What a blessing, delivered from all of that, certainly. Um, so, yeah, good times. And that's what I mean by just, and folks would be confused, right? What do you mean you would rather not be here than be on kidney dialysis? Because, yeah, this place ain't that great. This is a world of death, folks. Games of lies. Corporate America alone is enough to, have any sane person go running in the other direction, if you ask me. And old Benton here has been aware of that for probably 20 years by now, at least 15 years, just how nightmarish and horrific just the corporate system is. And now I see, and not that it's a bad thing, but people calling for, get out of America, right? Get out of the cities. The people who are not going to leave America probably, it's like, oh, get out of the cities. Like, yeah, I've explored the countrysides. The thing about getting out of a city is the being must leave the city to go somewhere. And those areas that would be entered in after leaving the city, those also are not attractive. and also are not necessarily accessible. Uh, can one just show up in the middle of nowhere? Well, I've done it. I've traveled the country living out of a backpack. I've showed up in the middle of nowhere. I've walked all day long in places like South Carolina on a U.S. highway where every single car that drove by turned their head to face me and stared me down the entire time they drove past. And I found that the only way to counteract this was to preemptively stare down every single car that drove by. And this is not an exaggeration. So, does that seem like the type of place that a stranger can just show up and be accepted? Right. Like, I would literally stop walking, plant my feet, and just comically use my body language to let them know I'm staring at you because you're staring at me. And then finally, they would, because they're a bit slow in the country, right? Um, they're a bit slow. So it would be a few seconds before they sort of, oh, we're not supposed to stare people down. So and then they would, kind of, uh, bashfully sort of look back at the road. But if not, if I just walked and did not react, I'm talking head turned physically towards me as much as they physically could as they drove by. Not kidding. Every car, right? So, oh yeah, get out of the cities. And go where? And so now it's like, yeah, get out of America. And go where, folks? Because some of these ideas around, freedom and liberty and, greatest nation on earth, yeah, it's propaganda and lies, but in comparison to some of these other countries, there is some truth to some of that. Is there a social safety net in other countries? Yeah, well, presumably, so-called socialism, is it accessible to someone who's just came to the country? I don't know. I do know that people who come to America have been historically been able to draw SSI for 7 years, right? That's been the system in America. But have Americans been aware of that? No. And Benton is only aware of it because Benton started following a channel that covers Social Security issues. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Had no idea. And not being angry about it, not trying to, uh, and, because of Kaczynskiism, understanding, well, there's, again, zero power to do anything about this. And what's the point of being angry about it or resentful about it, And since I've diverged from the main topic, I do want to cover there was a recent truck driving accident. There's been several high profile truck driving accidents involving uh, people who are not from America. And this ties into my ideas that there's simply no end to what Americans will tolerate. Now we're back to the concept of what? No power outside the individual, right? Um, so this idea of like, oh, seeing what's happening with the SSI, oh, they're giving it to migrants, oh, look, your tax dollars at work, right? Americans have proven through their actions, traced back to, I would say, 08, 09, but probably earlier, Americans are not concerned with how their tax dollars are spent. Now, the propaganda machine, right, the system, the 24-hour news cycle politics pretends like people care or are concerned about how their money is spent. But observably, right, using logic and reason and observing, watching how the American people behave, they don't give a fuck how their tax money's spent. So the government, which speaks only the languages of power and money, spends it however power and money tells it to spend the tax money, okay, which is to give a lot of it to banks and corporations. In fact, in fiscal year 2024, taxes taken out of just regular old W-2 workers, 1.15 trillion in interest on the national debt, and that money goes to people who are already fabulously wealthy. Yay! Thus proving Americans have no concern for how their taxes are spent. They simply don't care. So then, oh, look, when they want to bitch about food stamps and all of this. I'm like, well, that number one, it's a drop in the bucket. Number two, it's human beings getting to, let's just say they are kicked back at the house, relaxing all day, watching Netflix. Isn't that better than giving the money to bankers who have luxury automobiles, multiple mansions, and a yacht and a private jet? And that's what it is to be an American in a lot of ways, is to be so brainwashed, so thoroughly psychologically enslaved to think it's awesome that a rich person has multiple mansions and all of these luxury items and enjoys a luxurious lifestyle and has a high net worth and a high income and also gets free money. And in fact, gets way more free money than anybody, than you add up food stamps, total up all welfare programs. It can't touch what corporations and financial institutions siphon off the top of the government. And remember, bankers always pay themselves first. And a lot of the, in my opinion, a lot of the measures being taken to cut costs and do all of these things, it's in order to ensure the bankers that they're going to continue to be able to pay themselves first, and in that they will get their interest payments on the national debt. Because as economics, becomes the reality, becomes, because in the past America could pay for whatever it wanted to pay for. It could, no hyperbole, America could finance anything for decades in the past, and that's why we had Dick Cheney, right, just before the financial crisis, saying things like deficits don't matter, which what he meant by that was people won't shut the fuck up about balancing the budget, because Clinton managed to do it for 1 year, meaning that the government spent exactly what it brought in for one fiscal year, and that was considered a big accomplishment. And it wasn't too many years after that, and I'm not sure where in Clinton's 8-year run did that occur, but remember the next 8 years after that was George W. Bush. So you had 92 to 2000 was Clinton, then 2000 to well, I guess 91 to 2001. However it breaks down. Let's just say 92 to 2000, and then 2000 to 2008 was Bush Cheney, and Cheney said deficits don't matter, and he meant it. He wasn't making a joke. He wasn't using hyperbole. At that time, that was the view of government, corporations, and all of this. It doesn't matter how far they exceed the budget, meaning, if, especially Halliburton. Remember, Cheney had been CEO of Halliburton, and they had a lot to do with, the defense industry and the, invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan and all of this. And there was whatever the media perpetrated around, well, how is this going to be paid for? Well, what do you mean? It's borrow the money. Create money from nothing, borrow the money, right? Treasuries, bonds, securities. It was simply didn't matter whatever those wars cost. But now it does. Everything matters now at the level of what's going on at the government with the budgeting, because why? It only matters for one reason, because the bankers got to get paid first. See, that's why it matters. Because the bankers and the richest of the rich, the administrators of this world of death on behalf of antithesis, they're going to get paid first, no matter what. And whatever trickles down, to the unwashed masses, well, that's just whatever they get is whatever they get, right? And now if all of that is going to be cut, again, no power. The people have no power over that. Just like the people have no power over all of the free money for nothing. And again, banks produce nothing, folks. Financial institutions produce nothing of value for the system with respect to regular folks. Now, I understand people have credit cards and they're able to get a loan on a car and a loan on a house. See, Benton does not view that as a service. Benton doesn't view that as production, right? That's to worship the national religion of consumerism, and also the continuous expansion of the economy has to perpetually expand. It must do so, and then the corporate structure is always consolidating, becoming larger and more powerful at the top. See, so that's how we have now corporate profit growing at double the rate of the rest of the economy, which isn't even actually growing, but whatever the government claims the growth rate is. And I know I've diverged from unblocking the healing quite a bit, but we don't necessarily do topics all the time around here. It's some of it is just whatever comes to the broadcaster's mind in any given moment. Um, and let me see. Hang on. Can I remember why I brought up economics in the first place? How did I get off of healing onto economics? There must have been some kind of reason. Oh, medical coding and billing reminded. See, the problem is it's all tied together, and it's not a problem. However, Benton here has talked about and has recognized that the majority of Americans are able to work with and maybe process. Basically, the average American is able to hold a maximum of one idea in their heads at any given time, and that's a maybe. That's if they can even get the idea into their head enough to work with it at some level of just thinking and pondering. It's a maximum of one idea, meaning if I introduce an idea and they manage to focus on it, fleetingly for a few seconds, when the next idea is introduced, it does not connect to the first idea. The first idea is vomited out of the mind, is kicked out and evicted from the mind, and then the second idea, if it's even able to enter in, it replaces the first idea, right? So realistically, there's no way to tell people about all of this. So there's your idea of waking people up. Good luck with that. And then, in even getting them to consider the one topic or the one idea, here come the whataboutisms, including to this day, well, how are we going to pay for the roads? How many times have people talked about taxes and well, the solution to all of this, would be to, quit paying for it, right? The government. How about stop going to work to fund it? Oh, well, how are we going to pay for the roads? I don't know. You're staying at home. Where are you going? I guess actually that would be the answer. Last time someone asked me that question in response to me acknowledging that, the people have no power. So the people are not engaged in a political process. The prerequisite for engagement in a political process is power. Well, until the people are willing to participate in general strikes, there's no other way to take power other than what? Violence. And that's simply not going to happen as the state maintains a monopoly on violence. And so, as so many people now, on YouTube are looping into problem solving and looping into discussions of revolution or Luigiism or rising up against the system. And the system knows that the people are not capable of rising up against it. And then the people just assume, oh, well, when things get bad enough, of course the people will rise up and overthrow. And my contention is, well, logically, if I can prove that things are already bad enough and have been for quite some time, that proves that the people will not rise up when things get, quote, bad enough, because bad enough never arrives because there's no end to what Americans will tolerate. Back to truck driving. Yes, I remembered. Yay. Thank you, Theo Bromine. He did it. Back to the truck driving, there's been a number of high-profile accidents, deadly accidents involving, a lot of it is the Durkas, and that's what they're known as in the truck driving community. That's not me being offensive or racist. The Durkas, the turban wearers, right? The most recent one was a fellow who decided to bust a Yui on a turnpike during the daytime, right? And killed 3 people. A Durka. Okay. Now, in watching some truck driver reactions to this, one of the ones I watched yesterday kept going on and on about, well, no American, like nobody from here would attempt a U-turn on a turnpike. Oh, Benton has not only attempted one, Benton here safely executed a U-turn on a turnpike in Oklahoma. It was 2 a.m. Nobody was on the roads. And if there was even a hint that this was not going to be safely done, it would not have been attempted, right? And especially Benton here being an expert at those type of maneuvers. I once, as a rookie driver, pulled off a U-turn in Buffalo rush hour traffic, city traffic. Not even kidding. Yes, pulled it off safely, made it happen. Um, oh yeah, I'm way above the average number of U-turns in a commercial motor vehicle for a full-size rig. However, would not even consider this in traffic. Wouldn't even be a thought. Not for one moment. But this was accidentally got onto the turnpike. Couldn't avoid getting onto the turnpike. Didn't need to be on the turnpike. And oh look, there's enough room to turn around. It's 2 a.m. I see nobody's coming. Here we go. And was able to safely do it. Right. Now the company, if they had known, might have fired me. Who knows? Hard to say. But and a lot of times the drivers end up stuck when they try these maneuvers, because actually Americans do attempt these maneuvers. I know, because I've watched bonehead truckers enough to know that. I've seen enough rigs stuck in the fucking median of an interstate attempting a U-turn to know that, well, it can't all be Durkas. So there's also that. And people are angry, about the, and what are they angry about? They're angry because they're working as long-haul truckers and they can't earn a living, or they can't earn a living not because of the paycheck. They can't earn a living because of the conditions have become so horrible. Why have the conditions become so horrible? Because the Durkas don't give a fuck. Meaning the Durkas and the Africans and these, not the Latinos so much, but especially the Durkas and the Africans, they don't give a flying fuck what happens. And some of the Eastern Europeans are the same way, although they're not really causing the accidents from what I've seen. But they're going to tolerate whatever they got to tolerate to make that money. They don't give a fuck, right? So then what happens is, over a period of years, and this has changed even since 2018 when Benton entered the truck driving industry, which is a horrible nightmare of an industry, certainly. The conditions have only further eroded. And in the best of times, it's poor working conditions simply based on the level of danger, living in a truck, living on the road, extremely difficult to live a proper, healthy lifestyle, although Benton was able to do it because Benton's been preparing all of his own meals for the most part, for over 4 years now, including while driving a big rig. So here's what's interesting about this latest case. I was reading the comments and somebody was like, yeah, back in 2019, a truck driver collapsed a historic bridge in Arkansas. And I was like, well, wait a minute, I never heard about this. I was probably too busy truck driving 7 days a week for months on end to even hear about it back in 2019. Or I was, in between jobs temporarily. Who knows what was going on with Benton in 2019. Well, no, actually, I started in August of 2018. So, yeah, either way, it doesn't matter. But lost my train of thought a little bit, but it'll come back. Hang out in the station here for a moment. And the train station. Oh, in the comments, they were like, mention this bridge. So I Googled it, and I'm looking at the pictures, and they showed the driver that collapsed this bridge in Arkansas because there's, it was nowhere near being able to accommodate a commercial motor vehicle. I mean, not even close to it. Some old-timey 100-year-old bridge or whatever in Arkansas. Same dude that busted the U. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, damn, he looks exactly like the guy from this U-turn. And he's going to end up in prison for a homicide. I mean, the dude's absolutely going to prison. That's what a lot of people don't realize about truck driving. There's almost a 0% chance of this guy not going to prison over this. And then, so they're like, oh, deport him. I'm like, well, no, he's going to prison. And then he might go to the prison for the rest of his life. Who knows? It just sort of depends on how it shakes out. Who knows if he's ever going to get out of prison to go and get deported. But, and as if they can't just come back anyway. It's like, oh, yeah, deport him. Okay, well, do you think he's not going to just come right back? This motherfucker's out here collapsing bridges and busting U's and how much of this is a psyop, right? Again, I'm going official fiction, like, because there's video where you can see the guy, you can actually, in his dash cam, his driver facing camera, you can see him and you can see the trailer because of the way he's doing the U-turn. So you can actually see him looking back kind of over his shoulder and seeing that a van has crashed, just catastrophically at a high rate of speed, crashed into the side of his trailer. And just, you can see his reaction is basically no reaction. It's just, oh, well, here I am living my life and this is what's happened today. And it's probably the same way he reacted to the crash, to the collapsing of the bridge. I'm assuming. And so, how many of you folks, well, out in the country, see, you folks aren't necessarily engaging with and observing these migrants. Well, old Benton here is. And, I do things like walk around LA, and some of these people I know are from other countries look at me, seriously, this is a real thing. They look at me like I'm some kind of piece of garbage. Now, why do they look at me that way? I think it's because, hey, look at these chumps just letting people come take over their country. Like, I think that's a lot of it is how could they respect a country that lets them come here and do these things, right? How could they respect the people that live here and just tolerate all this? Because remember, there's no end to what Americans will tolerate. That's the level of psychological enslavement in this country. And the assumption is, part of the mind control is that, well, of course, at some point, there will be some pushback. Well, what's that based on? Now, clearly the government is operating, right? And, talking about politics as Hollywood for ugly people, it's operated in a way to make it seem like, well, things are about to change and, some of this is going to be addressed. And make no mistake, everything is being addressed all of the time. But what is it based on? Everything's addressed all of the time based upon the reality that corporations will have access to labor at the price that they set. The top of the corporations set the labor prices, and that labor will be performed under the conditions set forth by the corporations. Meaning, if the corporations at the top collude and say, this is what we're willing to pay for truck driving, and these will be the working conditions, if that means that all sorts of people are brought here from Africa and the Middle East, that means you've got all kind of foreigners from Africa and the Middle East driving trucks. Now, the Latin thing is a little different with the NAFTA and all of that. It's a little bit of a different situation, see. But this is simply what has happened, and this is what's going to happen. And surprise, surprise, people have talked about it's accelerated. And it was a thing when I entered truck driving in 2018, the foreign driver. It's only accelerated since then. And the reality is, it's perfectly timed, from my view, to overlap with the switch to automation. And this is the transition into automation. So, and I wanted to talk about truck driving on recent streams, so I'm glad that the Royal We got into this topic, and people enjoy hearing about it, because almost every time I mention truck driving, it's like, oh yeah, my grandpa was a truck driver. Americans romanticize truck driving. There's no romance. There's no appeal. It's a never-ending shit buffet, right? And I have, probably 80, I'm probably close to 5 actual years of experience in truck driving, although truck driving is so evil as an industry that it's like a rolling experience, meaning I've taken so much time off between jobs, some of that experience kind of like falls off. It's like, in order to maintain 3 years of truck driving experience, I have to keep working within a window. So technically I have like 3 years experience, but I've driven like 5 years, if that makes sense. But so like that whole year I didn't drive a truck, that causes like an entire year of my experience to potentially fall off. I mean, it sounds insane, but that's the reality, So this is, and I'm going to kind of jump around, but I have to jump around as I think of these things. So Americans have no idea, including myself, that when a person comes here from a foreign land and then somehow, some way gets a CDL And they have a thing called non-domicile CDL. Have y'all ever heard of this? Meaning a person can not live here, meaning a person can be a resident of a foreign land, right? Come to America and be issued what they call a non-domicile CDL. And I believe some of this was probably because of the NAFTA stuff, because you have truck drivers, legally and regulated to come into America, right, to deliver freight, from, and vice versa. There are, and into Canada, so you have American CDL holders who drive into Canada to deliver a load, right? It's a real thing. Old Benton here is not interested, but just America's enough for old Benton with the truck driving, and never driven a CMV, a commercial motor vehicle, long haul into California, and never will. Maybe I would choose to drive a CMV in California, but that would be a we only drive in California thing, and probably never going to happen. And they tried to send me to Cal. One time, they talked me into going to Nevada, and I said, yeah, as long as y'all understand I'm going the long way and I'm not going into California, right? As long as y'all know I'm going the motherfucking long way, I'm not going through Cali. Because if you look at where the load is, the person would go on, like, I think it was I-10 or I-40, probably I-40, and then go into Cali and then go north through Cali into Nevada. It's like, no, man, I'm going into Nevada without going into Cali. And then when I come back, I'm not going into Cali. And you can't send me to Cali to pick a load up to get me back here either. Motherfuckers. They still tried, but I said, no, sir. We ain't finna do that. And to be a truck driver is to be constantly tested at the level of how much of the shit buffet will the driver consume. It's a never-ending shit buffet, and the only way to not eat a particular item from the shit buffet is just to say, no, I will not do that, and then to be cajoled, and they'll still try to talk the driver into it. And you don't even want to know the sorrows that might befall when the driver initially refuses a load and lets them talk. I let them talk me into it once or twice, and it didn't turn out in my favor, I can assure you. Certainly did not. So, yeah, the non-domicile CDL holder, and a lot of people are blaming this on California. The reality is, yes, it's probably easier to get some of these types of CDLs in California because once a migrant enters into California, California is going to treat them like everybody else. That's just this is just California. You can't change it. Nobody can do anything about it. Now, here's what will happen. I can tell you this. The people of California, at a certain point, if the feds push, this is my opinion, and this runs contrary to some of what's been asserted, but at a certain point, the Californians are only going to tolerate a certain amount of federal intervention. So what I'm here to tell you is once the migrant enters into the borders of California, state of California will treat them just like it treats everybody else, which, I don't know, man. I would say I'm more in favor of that than not in favor of it. Now, why is the federal government structured in such a way to sort of facilitate, at a regulatory level? So here's what has nothing to do with California that most Americans have no concept of, and I didn't even know about, and I only heard about because of being a truck driver, and I only heard about it this year, is if a person comes here on one of these visas or whatever, they're from another country, they can get this non-domicile CDL. When they present their documents to get issued their license, there's a regulation at the federal level that says if their document doesn't list a first name, then what's listed on their CDL is no name given. So this guy that collapsed his bridge and that killed these 3 people, now I don't know that that's the case for him, but it's possible that when the authorities showed up and said, hey, we need to see your ID, it said no name given for his first name. Think about that. Now, imagine as a white person or a black person or a brown person that grew up in America, can you ever imagine being allowed as a citizen slave to show a law enforcement officer an ID that said no name given? What's your name? No name. It's from idiocracy. We got this fella not sure, you know. I mean, it's straight out of idiocracy. We got this guy not sure, and he's here to fix everything. Oh, well, we got these drivers, no name given, and they're here to help keep all the prices low, right? So-called inflation. He's here to keep the prices low and the wages. You know, he's here because the American Trucker Association. This shows you the corruption of America. The American Trucker Association to this day claims that there's a truck driving shortage. There's never been a truck driving shortage. Never. There's millions of American citizens with CDLs who could go drive long haul. They don't because of how nightmarish and horrific the industry is, and that's not even talking about how low the pay is. And the pay is very, very low for what is expected. Now, economics are so in the shitter, even way before the pandemic, even way before the recent shit, right? That people will look at, such as Benton's first year in trucking after taxes. Now, it does include a bonus, but after taxes and also after a garnishment for an old student loan from the 90s, right? Benton averaged like $890 a year. I'm sorry, $890 a week for his entire first year because I keep meticulous records generally. Not always, but I figured it out. So, and that was, not really knowing what the fuck I was doing, knowing what I was doing by the end of the first year. But, the first couple of months certainly wasn't making $900 on average. So, yeah, to a lot of people, $1,200 after taxes a week sounds like a lot of money. Well, not once the person goes out there and performs the job and understands what's involved in making the $1,200 after taxes a week as a company driver. Not until then. And if you look at it per hour, it's not a very high hourly at all. It's just more or less all you can eat. And in fact, multiple large truck driving companies have been successfully sued class action because provably they paid drivers lower than minimum wage because they had these drivers out on the road. But these drivers weren't getting loads, so they were just like hanging out at the truck stop. And some of them probably wanted to hang out at the truck stop. And the future of over-the-road truck driving is foreigners, right? And this is during the transition to self-driving. And don't tell me why it can't happen. It's already happening. It's already happened. It's happening right now for long haul. And, the easiest forms of trucking is where it has begun. But homeless people, why wouldn't a homeless person, if they're able to get a CDL and do the job, and why wouldn't they just say, fuck it, we'll just live in this big rig? And and it's fascinating because the industry is set up in such a way that at my level of experience, all the companies assume that my number one consideration is if I'm out on the road, I want maximum miles because I would have a life and a family. And in order to leave my life and my family as a driver, I must get 3,000 plus miles a week. I don't want 3,000 miles a week. And in order to get paid for 3,000 miles a week, the driver is probably driving 3.3K. So to get paid for 3K, the driver probably drives 3.3. Why is that? Because the industry steals 10% of the driver's mileage through something called, I forget what they call this, but it's a certain type of bullshit routing based on the old days where it just wasn't practical to figure out, on a map exactly how many miles did this motherfucker drive from pickup to delivery. So they'd go like zip code to zip code or whatever. Right? There's like software now that does this. I think it's called PC Miler. And it's set up to intentionally just steal 10% of the driver's productivity. And I knew about that when I went into truck driving because I thoroughly researched all aspects of truck driving as much as possible. I did my research and I said, okay, well, they're just stealing 10% of my productivity. And then the government is going to steal a certain other percentage in taxation. And then inflation is going to steal another proportion in wages, right? And we now see mainstream news articles about how, you know, inflation is so bad, the worst thing a person could do was keep cash, spend that money. And, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, I was talking to someone who used to be on my channel called Highly Suspect, and I told him, because he was working for contractors doing remodeling of homes, and he's talking about these Indian people, you know, some guy that was very successful in motels or whatever, and he's got a lot of cash. These guys always have a lot of cash. So, you know, Highly Suspect is pointing out that these guys were spending their cash to have remodels, you know, have all kind of shit done to their houses. And I said to him, yeah, man, it's an economic climate where they know to spend that money as fast as possible. And then he, because Highly Suspect has his own mental afflictions, he said, well, no, I went and talked to this guy I worked for, and he said, you were dead wrong, right? Well, no, not only was I not wrong, I was ahead of the curve, so much so that 4 years later, it's just mainstream news articles. Hey, make sure if you got any kind of money, you'd be insane to hang on to it. And I said, yeah, those Indian guys know that it's an environment where they're losing money. If they got 500 G's in the bank, burning a hole in their pocket, and they're inclined to save it or invest it, they know that they need to buy some shit with it, because to just leave it in the bank in an inflationary environment that's likely to become more inflationary, they're setting fire. There's the fires of inflation are burning their $500,000. So why wouldn't they write a check to this company that Highly Suspect is working for 100 G's for improvements to their property? Because they're going to increase the value of the property. They're keeping their $100,000 by giving it to this guy that Highly Suspect worked for. But because of actual real racism, Highly Suspect, and I'm not calling him a racist, I'm saying you got Georgia boys, uh, instead of saying, well, I'm glad to have the work, and I'm sure they're glad to have the work, but they're confused as to why the foreigners have all this money. It's like, well, number one, it's the American dream of come here, live under certain types of conditions, do certain undesirable jobs and businesses, and save money, right? That's why they've got the money to employ people to go work on their house. And they understand economics by the time they get to that level, see. Americans don't know anything about any of this for the most part. And I say Americans, really it's the proletariat, you know, it's the underclass. You know, it's the great unwashed masses, the commoners, the psychological slaves. They don't know anything about this, right? And Americans just, and so it's the idea of foreigners coming, taking the jobs. Well, Americans just watch it happen. So what's the difference? Again, like truck drivers, people hate truck drivers. It's not a respectable job, but it's romanticized because of movies like Convoy, and because everybody had an uncle or a dad or a grandpa that they loved who drove a truck, and it was romanticized because he left, he was gone, he kept America moving, and then he came back, and we gave him a big hug and a squeeze and a kiss on the cheek, and now that somehow got translated over to how they view truck driving. It ain't that. It ain't that. No, it is not. It's to be treated like a piece of human garbage. It's to drive a big rig, and everywhere the big rig goes, everybody that lays eyes on it, myself included, hates it. Because when I get into my personal vehicle and drive around, I hate being around big rigs. I'm like, oh my God, look at that truck. It's going to be in my way, right? But now that we've added distracted driving to the mix, people hate the trucks, and they hate the feeling of being stuck behind the truck, but then they choose to tailgate the truck for as long as the truck will let them tailgate it, until it goes to one lane because of construction, and now they think, oh my God, I'm about to get trapped behind this truck that I've chosen to follow for the last 100 miles because I'm distracted driving, looking at my phone, and then it's becomes a complete clusterfuck as car after car after car after car tries to shoot in at the last moment to not get trapped behind the big rig through the construction zone. And then the olden days, the moment moment it went back to 2 lanes, all of those cars would just shoot around the big rig. What's changed now is they don't shoot around the big rig anymore. Now they all stay back there so they can look at their phones. See, this is a sick society, and it's not defensible. This is an indefensible society, right? And that's why I've called out and acknowledged the defenders of the indefensible system. This is indefensible, and it's no way to live. It's not a life. This is a death, folks. This is not a life, what I'm describing. Okay. And to be driving some old piece of shit minivan, Dodge Omni van from 1987 or 1992 or whatever it was, that's unsafe by now at any speed, and then to either not have the ability to, maybe this thing just couldn't stop, right? Maybe the driver of the Dodge Omni, or that's a car, I think, but whatever the Dodge called their van back then, it was pre-Caravan days, I'm pretty sure, whatever that was called back then. Maybe it was a Caravan, but it's the old school, you know, boxier minivan, whatever that was called, and maybe they were going 80 or whatever on the turnpike. Who knows what the speed limit it was, and maybe they just couldn't stop, because most of the time when you see these rigs get stuck in the median, nobody crashes into the trailer that's blocking both lanes. It's just everybody has to wait till the fucking heavy wrecker comes and pulls them gets them out of the way, right? So probably these people saw it, hit the brakes, and just couldn't, still hit it at 60 or whatever. And then, what's a crumple zone? The van's like, crumple zone? I don't know what you're talking about, right? It's not funny, but it kind of is on some level. And again, now we're back to PSYOP. Is this even real, man? Well, no, it's not, because it's occurring within a delusion. So no, it's not real. And this is, Americans will simply continue to tolerate all of this. Now, if it changes, and it very well may change, people will think, oh, look, people complained, the government listened, and it got fixed. No, what changed was what suited the system. So if all of this gets cleaned up and addressed, it will be because the system has decided to clean it up and address it, for the system's own purposes, and for corporations, and the further consolidation of corporate strength, power, and profit at the top. See, and as America becomes China more and more and more, and make no mistake, folks, as far as I'm concerned, my life, this is China, not culturally, but this is, whatever's been promoted for the last 20 to 30 years as far as how Americans believe China is or operates at a level of how their society functions and is operated. That's what we have here now, as far as I can tell. And as it becomes even more of that, presumably the system will move away from just this abject chaos, into something a little more orderly. I mean, isn't that what's promoted as what China is? This orderly lockdown, you do what we tell you, social credit score type shit, with the, Tiananmen Square being a symbol of, hey, the government's not going to let people just willy-nilly go sow chaos, right? It's not going to be permitted. It's not going to be allowed. So yeah, has that unblocked the healing yet? He's like, damn, when does let the healing begin? And that's really more of I would say, than me telling people how to perform an unblocking of the healing in order to receive healing. It's an acknowledgement that that's what would need to happen. And it's an acknowledgement of, within the individual is where the individual's power lies, and only there does the individual have the power to get out of their own way enough to allow healing to enter in. Now, going back to what Benton talked about with his own chronic illness and Benton just telling people repeatedly over an extended period of time that he was actively dying. Well, that was the reality. The reality is, if Benton continued to live the way he was living, he would not be here speaking to you. That is the reality. And Benton, at the level of his strength and it sounds like a cope, that's fine. Everything's a cope. Within a vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, a world of death, games of lies, on some level, if the being, it, pulls with enough of an extended view, right, there's nothing here. What's not a cope? So yeah, the fact that it sounds like a cope, who cares? But that's how seriously it had to be taken by yours truly in order to facilitate and not block the healing, right? Because how can the being access great levels of healing while directing one's efforts externally where there's no power, and by listening to so-called conventional wisdom of, hey, you're going to be fine, everything's going to be okay, go to the doc, get your diagnosis, you know take advantage of whatever the system has to offer, go through the medical coding and billing, have your potential for future future quality of life, have that ruined. Because I haven't met a single person who had a chronic illness and went through the medical system who did not see their quality of life ruined. Ruined. And so that medical system, corporations, remember Luigi, why is Luigi famous? Right? Official fiction. You know, what he did, that involved what I believe is the largest medical corporation in the country. I'm pretty sure that's the biggest one, if not the biggest, one of the biggest. Which means what? Consolidation at the top, collusion, competition is a sin. All they do at the top is compete against the little guy, right? All they do is compete against the little guy. So it's like when I was living with my parents temporarily, getting my Microsoft certified systems engineer, studying for that, and saving money, being able to have the money to you know, and again, this idea that, cost of living and we can't afford to live. Yeah, this was in the This was 1999, folks. This was 1998, 1999. I chose to move back in with my parents for like 9 months to be able to spend 6 months studying for this, to get this certification, to be able to get a higher paying job, right? Because my woman, who later became my wife, ex-wife number one, she then got a roommate, and they shared expenses. And I went and moved in with my parents to minimize my expenses. And this was all done knowing that we were going to continue to date. And she came and visited, and I probably went and visited her a couple of times. And then we're going to get, when this is all done, I'm moving back there, and I'm going to get a job, which is exactly what happened with my new certification. It wasn't high paying, but it was at least a job that wasn't in a convenience store, right? So it paid a little bit better than the convenience store, not a lot, but a little bit better. Instead of $8 an hour, it was 11 or 12, right? So yeah, in either way, and those jobs all pay the same now. So 25 years later, the convenience store pays well, actually that's not even true. The convenience store pays more now that I think about it. But the IT stuff pays about the same. Funny how that works. So the McJobs have actually gone up a little bit, although adjusted for inflation, it hasn't gone up. So adjusted for inflation, the IT stuff actually pays less now. And truck driving pays less than it did back then when we factor in inflation. The wages went down, right? And then again, what's been the theme around here? Reconciliation. Your average American has zero ability to reconcile all of this in their minds. Even listening to me talk about this, a lot of people can't reconcile all of this. And then here's Benton out here operating in the realm based on being able to reconcile these notions. So why would I want to participate? What's there to look forward to on those levels? The idea that it's, things are going to get better based on what? That's called common sense, word of mouth, and the word of mouth of everything. The constant bright siding of everything all the time. Things will get better. Well, or they won't. I mean, what's that based on? I'm sure there were people in the siege of fucking Stalingrad or whatever, whichever, I forget if it was Stalingrad or Leningrad, the siege of Stalingrad. I'm sure there were at least a few bozos, toxically positive bozos, who the whole time were like, things are going to get better. I don't know, man. Go read about what actually happened and how long that happened and how people lived during that. And the fact that some of the folks every day were going, things are going to get better. That's called hopium. What's that based on? Why would things get better? I need a reason. I need some logic. I need it explained to me. Okay, how are things going to get better? At some point somebody's going to do something. Like what? What's the base? What is that based on? Huh? Where's the precedent for that? What are you talking about? I don't get it. I'm confused. What is this? What even is this? But yeah, no name given on the CDLs, and just a regular driver's license too. As if everybody's now a pop star, right? One name pop star. You know, Madonna's last name can be Madonna, and then her first name on her ID could be no name given. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. Now, what was that? What is the advantage to the truck driving industry? See, because none of this is on accident. The advantage to the truck driving industry is you can have a whole bunch of motherfuckers from the Middle East or Africa that all have the same last name, and their ID, yeah, maybe their IDs have different driver's license numbers, but they all have the same fucking name on their IDs. So you have trucking companies, right? These foreign truck driving companies, what they do is they create a series of motor carriers. It's called an MC or an authority, right? They create, and there's a certain amount of money involved in creation of one of these. They create multiple MCs ahead of time so that when this guy, when no name given, what would be a, when no name given Durka number, and let's just call him number 26 because that's the number his ID ends in. When no name Durka number 26, you know, so that trucking company's done. That's it's a wrap on that trucking company, except they're going to absolutely continue to operate with the exact same equipment, and whoever works for that company, everybody's going to keep their jobs. Overnight, they're just going to switch to a different MC number. And there's been people who've seen, and I've seen some version of this, although it's not always nefarious. It can be an owner operator who just got his own authority. But now what they do is the stickers on the side of the truck, they have to display their MC number. They have a DOT number and an MC number. So all that happens is the company calls their whoever's left of their drivers and says, "Hey, we're now under this different company name. We need you to change this on the truck, and here's the new DOT and MC numbers, and here's your new permit numbers." And they just fax over or email over all the new documents for the whatever need. And a lot of these are companies just run completely illegal. They just they fraudulently maintain the logs. So it was this idea of, we're going to move to electronic logs. Well, who pushed for that? The big boys pushed for that. Again, it's the consolidation at the top to compete against the little guy. So it doesn't hurt. JB Hunt isn't hurt by all these foreign drivers. That helps JB Hunt. Schneider National, the company I started with, it doesn't hurt them that there's all these foreign drivers. It helps them because it helps keep the little guy from ever growing into the big guy. None of these little companies, because they can't grow because they're competing against all of the foreign drivers who are only there to degenerate the working conditions, right? And to, bring down the wages. Now, so what it comes down to is Benton can either go work for a mom and pop that's still in business and is trying to grow big enough to either get bought out or get, grow to the level of a big boy. Meanwhile, they got to have there has to be some version of money laundering, or there's some money backing all of this, because I'm here to tell you right now, mid-level and small companies that are doing over-the-road truck driving are not making a profit. In fact, they're losing money and have been for years now. Years. And the only ones who are breaking even or making a profit are doing so on contract freight. So meaning every load, right, that involves the so-called spot market, it's not possible to earn a profit. I want to say that again. In dry van, 53-foot dry van, running the spot market, it's not possible to make a profit. It's not possible, right? And that's where we got into when I ran reefer, which it's a little more doable in reefer because the rates are higher. But when I was running reefer, because the rates were in the toilet, what happens when the company that employed me, that I allowed to employ me, they leased because they realize that they need to, in order to keep their safety rating and their insurance, they need to attract a Benton level driver. What's a Benton level driver? He doesn't get tickets. He doesn't crash into shit. He does things as much by the book because he's almost narcissistically obsessed with keeping his own record clean. I don't do any of that. I only do all of that for me, right? And there are, my integrity is for me. Which is how I ended up paying $1,800 for a cargo claim on that job. That's my own integrity because here's how corrupt America is. Benton failed to secure the load. It was a multi-stop load. For some reason, I just decided not to. Why I did this, I have no idea. Part of it is just laziness because I don't do a lot of multi-stop loads. And I thought, hey, maybe I should climb in there and throw the load bar on this. But my experience in dry van is the shit really don't fall over anyway, right? And if it does, and it doesn't, but I'm not thinking, hey, the moment these expensive ass kiwi hit the floor of this trailer, it's his food grade and it's got to be thrown out, right? Now, could Benton have opened the trailer before he backed up at the dock and said, oh, look, there's kiwi everywhere? Could Benton have attempted to sort of put it all back together in a way that the place would have actually accepted it? I don't know, maybe. Benton's undiagnosed fake autism really won't allow that to happen because I don't know how to put that shit back together where it's going to look right. I don't know how many kiwi goes on each, box or whatever. I mean, the whole fucking pallet of kiwi, $1,800 wholesale worth of kiwi. This is some high dollar, highfalutin, hippy dippy, fancy folk kiwi. This ain't your regular kiwi. I know because I ate a couple of them. Delicious. It hit me later on. Well, shit, I should have, why didn't I gather up a few bushels of this kiwi? But whatever. Either way. So here's how corruption works, and this is called a moral hazard. When I report this to the company, and I immediately reported it to the company because that's my duty based on my principles, right? It's not to do what most people do and freak out and say, oh my God, what lies can I tell to get out of this? It's like, well, no, fall on the sword, admit what you done. So the company immediately wants to know, their first question, well, did you secure the load with a load bar? And I'm just like, motherfucker, clearly not. How else did the shit fall over, right? But see, I'm expected to lie to them and say, oh yeah, of course I secured it. It's just, the way that it's just the shit fell over. I don't know what happened. And then so that my company can battle it out with the insurance and with the broker so that, I won't be made to pay for it. When I just fell on my sword, I'm like, what are you even talking? So my thing is with autism, I can't even have this conversation with this guy. I'm not capable of even having the conversation. I'm just like, yeah, man, I forgot to put the fucking load bar on. And I'm like, why are you even asking me this? And then now I don't want to deal with whatever the company's going to do to me. So I'm just like, fuck it. I'll pay for it. Now, under normal circumstances, when I entered the industry in 2018, when the rates were fucking high, and then especially anytime the rates are high, the company's just going to deal with it. They're not going to, I'm not going to be expected. It's just going to be like, yeah, the driver fucked up. Oh, well, that's what happened. Well, when the rates are in the toilet, now we're nickeling and driving the driver already. And, oh, he offered to pay for it. And I'm assuming, okay, well, they'll probably just split it with me, right? No, they just let me pay for the whole thing. I'm like, wow, you motherfuckers. Now, the same company, though, was paying a whole bunch of money to her. Oh, wait a minute. What's this company? Ryder, I think. One of those companies, Ryder. They leased this truck with a full maintenance program. Now, that means it's got to be taken to Ryder for servicing. Meanwhile, the trucking company had their own shop. So they're paying for their own mechanics and their own big, nice shop, right? Arkansas company. But then my truck is on a maintenance program. Nobody told me. They just, Penske, sorry, it was Penske. They just assumed I knew all of this. So at a certain point, the air conditioner, brand new truck, air conditioner never worked. Brand new truck. It was brand new when I got it. air conditioner never worked. So Penske leased them a truck with a non-working air conditioner. So now it's got to get worked on. Well, they don't tell me that it's got to be taken to Penske in a different town, and that here's truck driving, folks. This is what I mean about the bad conditions. I'm expected on my own time to just drive this tractor across town and take it to Penske, and then either wait around, right, for them to work on it, and then either figure out my own way back to the terminal, which is really pointless. There's nothing to do there anyway. I guess I could come back and get in my personal car and go do shit. And then, but here's how the trucking works. Because the dispatchers are pressured and obsessed with getting the driver on. See, I'm not under a load because of the trucks being worked on. And I'm not being paid. But I'm driving a truck across town and I'm waiting around for it to get repaired. And then, why? Because I'm dumb enough to work for free. Right? That's why. And that's what I deserve if I'm dumb enough to work for free. Meanwhile, nobody told me to take the fucking truck to Penske, and I didn't know to ask. So we wasted a whole day where I just sat around the terminal, and I went and talked. I went and talked to the mechanics. I explained the problem. They said, "Yeah, well, we're busy right now, and I work 7 days a week. I'm on the road for months on end. I don't care if I don't work that day. Who cares? I would prefer less miles, not more, remember?" So I was like, I'm just hanging out. Whatever. I got my car. I can go do whatever I need to do. But I live in the truck, so it is an inconvenience. And, but, I got the money to go get a hotel if I want, and go to the movies. I'm able to kill the time. So we wasted a whole day because eventually one of the mechanics was like, "Wait a minute, isn't that one of the Penske lease trucks?" I'm like, "Yeah." It's like, "Oh, that goes to Penske." I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm glad somebody told me that." And so then next day it goes to Penske, and it's always like, "Oh yeah, we talked to Penske. They think they can get it right in and fix it in a few hours." So fast forward to Benton, who's an early riser, gets to Penske so he can be the first one in line or whatever, and he's just waiting in the truck. I'm there by like 4 a.m. or whatever, which is, again, it's fine because I'm up early. And then only to see the look on the mechanics' faces when they arrive, and yeah, it doesn't really matter at my company. Whoever called somebody that works in an office at Penske, that's not who determines when they're going to look at the truck and how long it's going to take to fix. It's the techs that have just arrived at work, and I'm judging by the disgruntled looks on their faces. It's going to be a minute. So while I'm trying to wander around town on foot to avoid driving these mechanics insane while hanging out on the property, which is the last thing they want, so I'm killing time. So I'm walking around and then coming back every few hours on foot to see what's going on, right? All while this is happening, my company is attempting to assign me a load so I can go pick a load up that day, right? So the driver must be stressed out to the maximum. And remember, folks, the self-driving trucks will never operate under these conditions because there's no human to torture. The self-driving truck will experience none of this, meaning the fact that there's no human there to torture means that just that fact will make the system operate more efficiently, because removing the driver from the equation. And so what we have now is a bunch of bozos on YouTube, and I'm going to make an intelligent point that I've never heard anybody make, although people will claim it's been made. But does anybody remember the oil crisis of the 70s and the lines for gasoline? And if your license plate ends in a certain letter, you can only get gas on certain days, right? The oil crisis. Well, the commoners did not understand this at the time, but here's this was the cause of that. It was because the companies that owned the fucking ships that go overseas and pick up the barrels of oil and then bring them here to be refined, The people who own and operate those vessels figured out how to only ever go get the barrels of oil when they got the highest price. So if the price wasn't as high as possible, they would not send their ships to go get the oil. That's what caused the price to go up. And people could say, no, it was this, it was no, it was that. That's what caused the crisis. Period. End of story. So what's happening now in truck driving is the rates have been in the toilet for an extended period of time, meaning that long haul companies that depend upon the spot market for any sort of percentage of their business cannot make a profit. It's not possible. For the small companies, can't be done. Best case scenario, they might make a tiny profit month to month. They might be able to break even on a year in for the whole year. Their trucks ain't making a profit. It's not possible. Now, that's a company operating based on the regulations. So now you see who is able to make money. Well, no name Durka number 26 driving for a company that does not even bother itself with the regulations because it already has 10 motor carrier numbers established, so that when the government shows up to audit the books and puts them out of business, they just go to the next motor carrier number. And you think that the government doesn't know this? You think the American Truck Driving Association doesn't know this? Because the ATA, remember, it still claims there's this gigantic truck driving shortage. That's never existed. No matter what happens, they're going to continue to claim that we got a shortage of 50,000 drivers, so we have to continue to bring in foreign labor. That's the official position of the American Trucker Association, right? Which is as corrupt as the rest of everything else, but who claims to be, pro-industry, pro-driver, and all of these things, pro-American, anything but. And if Americans weren't in the habit of tolerating literally everything, then it wouldn't be that way. It's that way because Americans ain't shit. And Americans ain't shit because how is a people respectable when they will just let the government do whatever it wants? Who could respect that? As Americans, would you respect when you saw people in another country just letting whatever happen? Would you respect the people that live there? It's still, the French are still made fun of for their military supposedly surrendering. Meanwhile, the French will actually participate in a general strike when their government starts tripping. Why do you think they have actual socialism, meaning a social safety net? It's because the people demand it. That's why. Why do Americans believe that socialism is just the worst possible thing that can ever happen? Meanwhile, America has socialism. We just only have the parts of socialism that benefit the corporations. And America doesn't have the parts of socialism that would actually potentially benefit individual human beings. Yeah, we got all the worst of socialism with none of the potential upsides. Yeah, to be an American is to be a chump among chumps. See, is to be the vanguard and the bleeding edge of being a chump and a sucker, and loving it when the spinner hat and the dunce cap and the kick me sign is applied. To love the kick me sign, to love the spinner hat, to love being in the corner, being made to face the corner, right? Nobody puts baby in a corner, right? I don't know about all that. I don't know about that. So back to truck driving, and you're just expected to do all these things for free, and so a lot of this stuff I've talked about before, but so back to not being able to make money. And remember, when the conditions are great, right? When the rates are sky high, the company does not share the profits with me. So when I'm working for this running reefer and they've decided that they can turn a profit running me all over the Northeast on short runs, where if a person drives a truck in the Northeast delivering refrigerated food to warehouses, they make double what I make. Seriously, it's there's nobody who lives in the Northeast region who's pulling a reefer who's making under $1 an hour. I'm sorry, $1 a mile. So they think they're going to have me up there for 65 cents a mile doing the job that pays $1 plus a mile. And I just told him, I said, yeah, man, I'll just move up here and get a job that pays way more. Like, what are you talking about? Meanwhile, I don't really mind taking a load into the Northeast, but I need to get a load and leave the Northeast. I'm not trying to stick around. So they thought I was going to deliver a load in Philadelphia area, deadhead to Pennsylvania, deliver in New York State, and then pick up a load in New York State that's only ever going to go to somewhere like Vermont or New Hampshire. Now I'm in the middle of fucking nowhere, and who the fuck knows what they're going to do to me after that? They don't even know, right? So I'm like, nope, not doing that, and that's not going to happen. Sorry about your luck. But why? And remember, under normal circumstances, they would never do this to me, because what is the reason for this, to lease this Penske truck that costs a fortune, to run me ragged to maybe break even? It's because they are attempting to attract and retain drivers of a certain level who don't collapse bridges in Arkansas and don't, do U-turns in the middle of the day on the turnpike and kill people, right? To maintain their safety rating and their insurance and all of this. And is the Durka the Durka company, are they even insured in the first place? Well, yeah, fly by night, fraudulent, who can just, what shell company can claim to meet the legal requirement of insurance? Meanwhile, once the accident happens, we find out, oh, there's no insurer behind this. There's no insurer that's going to pay for that. It's not going to happen. The way that company was operating for that accident on that turnpike, that's not going to happen. I don't know who the families of those people who are dead are going to sue, but it's not going to be whatever that insurance company is, because that's not even a real insurance company. And I'm not an expert on that. I might be wrong. Maybe it is a real insurance company. But so what we see in America is, again, back to the shit buffet. If I'm dumb enough to just let the company run me ragged all across the Northeast, then that's fine. But again, the big boys competition is a sin. I got ran all over the Northeast for like 6 weeks when I was a rookie driver, because I didn't know it. I didn't know the difference, because Snyder National hire one of the big boys. They hire inexperienced drivers, and then they get the advantage of being able to haul freight around the Northeast for a third of the labor costs. See, and that's hiring in Americans. That's how they compete against the little guy. The little guy is not able to do that, because unless somebody just wants to run all over the Northeast on short runs, it's not going to happen. See, and the answer to that is, and then now I've got a fleet manager telling me that I have to change because of the rates. And I'm like, no, I don't. I'm a company driver, so I don't have to worry about the rates. Meanwhile, when the rates are high, y'all doesn't give me a bonus. Nobody gave me a bonus. Now, I did get a bonus, but that was different. That was with my first company. But that was to attract drivers, right? That was to attract new drivers. It was new hire bonus, for inexperienced drivers, right? That wasn't for experienced drivers. That was to attract people to the industry. And that's corporate fascism. That's Benito Mussolini corporate fascism. That was the United States federal government working with these large trucking companies and having programs to bring people into the industry. See, because what is the industry-wide turnover on an annual basis is 90%, meaning for Snyder National to be able to get a truck driver who doesn't know not to run all over the Northeast for 6 weeks for 40 cents a mile, right? In order to have him working for the company, there has to be programs to bring new drivers in because of the turnover. And so this is a great description of corporations running our lives. Our lives are ran by corporations. The populace is enslaved to corporations and government and the state, and there's no way out of it. People can homestead all they want. That doesn't solve the societal problems. That's every man for himself. Just like, from my perspective, the time spent living in a car on the street, that's kind of my version of homesteading in a way, right? And then fending for myself. Some people, it's a garden in the backyard, and we're going to grow some of our own food. We're going to trade with the neighbors. We're all going to work together. Yeah, this is like my version of that in a way, you know. But oh, it doesn't, it's got a certain connotation, homelessness. Oh, it sounds dangerous, you know, this, that, and the third. What I am can't fear it anyway. But then to romanticize, having a piece of property and so-called homesteading. Well, I'm from bumfuck Arkansas. That's just how people used to live. Just there, it wasn't, the corporate hellscape hadn't, wasn't quite as pervasive, and hadn't sunk its hooks into every fucking county in this entire country, with maybe a couple of exceptions here and there. Everything wasn't fully corporatized yet, so there was no reason to romanticize somebody living on, a few acres in Arkansas with a garden and, a couple of trailers, right? Here's your homestead, right? It wasn't romantic. That was po folks, because that was the time when it was all about going and getting an education to be able to work indoors under the air conditioning with proper hygiene, wearing nice clothing, and to be viewed as having a job, that's sort of worthy of respect or whatever, right? That's what it was. It's no longer that, folks. It's no longer that. But still, people continue to, again, the word of mouthing of everything, the, common sense, conventional wisdom is still to go get a college degree. More and more people are saying, well, that's a complete waste of time and money. But that's still the conventional wisdom, just like the conventional wisdom is, oh, look, truck driving shortage. Well, no, there's not. But let me get back to the whole reason I failed to make the entire point about the ships going and picking up the oil, only going and picking up the barrels of oil when the price was the absolute highest. So that caused the oil crisis, the so-called oil embargo, right? And as it was going on, the system knew what was happening, so it had to be portrayed in a certain type of way in the news media. So what's happening now with the freight rates is, here's how financial markets work, folks. The moment the financial markets understand that the driver is in the process of exiting the industry, the rates immediately price that in. Meaning the rates, as they exist for long-haul trucking, are based on the fact that there's no longer a need to pay a driver. And the fact is, I've met drivers in truck stops who claimed that they weren't being paid, and they were doing the job. And this last one that told me it, he was a Durka, and he said, yeah, they're doing this bullshit thing. They're paying me a percentage of the load. And really what they were doing was just giving him just enough money to survive. So effectively, he wasn't receiving pay. He was, they would just send him some money every once in a while on his fuel card, and it was enough to feed himself, right? And remember, this guy's grew up under starvation, to some extent. He grew up where it's just more or less normal when there's periods of time of just, we don't have money, we just don't have money, we don't have resources. He doesn't know the fucking difference, What's the difference from his perspective, right? It's just normal to him. So, and remember, corporations will have access to labor at the price that they dictate. And then when you combine that with the consolidation at the top and the competition is a sin, and somebody's got to haul this freight, right? And in order to have the labor set at the price of the corporation's choosing, no matter what, meaning, oh, okay, well, now there's a driver shortage, but there's not. And now, oh, let's bring a bunch of drivers from other foreign lands who will work. Even if you don't pay them, they will work. And, maybe it's just their families getting taken care of in the home country. I don't fucking know. Don't care, really. Who cares? But, there's no competing with that, right? So at what point in that then gets transferred onto a person like me? It's just, over time, I'm just expected to do things that I'm simply unwilling to do, right? So the Durka, when something has to be fixed on the truck and it can't be avoided, right? They don't think, well, I'm a night driver and it's the end of my shift and I'm going to get some rest. So therefore, I'm not putting this truck in the shop because I live in the truck, and where the fuck am I going to rest? No, they just put the truck in the shop and go sit in the driver's lounge and, fall asleep, and, they just deal with it. Old Benton fucking parks like normal and has his rest break. And then, we'll fix it when we'll fix it. So that then, maybe that day, that shift maybe ended normally. But then the next day, well, Benton wants to wake up at midnight and drive the truck, right? Well, depending on the shop, there may not be a version of putting this thing in the shop. See what I'm saying? Like, I might have to wait till 7 a.m. And this happened to me I did this one time at a Love's, and, I parked, and I knew, and I see, and for somebody that works in an office, they can't ever respect that, hey, I just worked a full shift. Like, I'm now going home for the day, right? It would be like somebody that worked in an office. Now it's time for them to go home for the day, except, well, now we need them to drive in their car to a third location and just kind of stay there for an indeterminate period of time. And you're not going to know when you're free to go back home. Just go to this place where there's a truck stop and a driver lounge, but you're just there. And you don't know for how long, and you're just there. That's effectively what happens when I put myself under those conditions. So I'm not going to do that. I've worked my day. A big part of why I work at night, why I start early in the morning, is so that when I roll into the truck stop at 2 p.m. or earlier, there's a spot for me. I back into my spot. I don't have to fight 100 drivers for one of the last two spaces. I don't have to worry about, it's dark as fuck. What am I gonna back into? Am I gonna have to get in and out of the truck 20 times while people are waiting to get by so that I don't damage any of this equipment? Because remember, if Benton backs into somebody's truck, he's not driving away like most people do. Again, the lack of integrity, the dog eat dog, the moral hazards in society. I'm not just gonna flee like most people do. I'm gonna knock on if they're not in the truck, I'm gonna knock on the truck. If nobody's in the truck, I'm going to leave a fucking note, right? It's called doing the right thing. There's no possibility of a proper society when the majority of the people will not do the right thing. And that's the indefensible society that so many folks want to defend. We have a society where the majority of the population, if they can get away with it, will not do the right thing. They won't do the right thing. If what's in their best interest is they've just backed into some owner operator's brand new tractor, they're driving the fuck away. Period. That's what they're going to do. And if, somebody gets the license plate and the truck and trailer number, they do. If not, they don't. Right? So Benton's backing into his space by 2 p.m. Right? Well, Benton's got to get a night's sleep during the motherfucking daytime. See, there's a trade-off. What Benton's not going to do is put the freaking rig in the shop, and then it's just they fix it whenever they fix it. And meanwhile, there's no hotel, there's nowhere to go. It's just Benton's just at a truck stop until this thing gets fixed, and then going to be expected to continue to work the next day without proper rest. Not doing it. So, but I did what the company wanted to do, which is I went in that day and just checked to see, is there any way that they could even look at. So if I go in there and they're like, yeah, man, we can get you right in, and I know that the repair is likely not to take very long, yeah, okay. I'm not unreasonable. I'll wait an hour or two. Who cares? Assuming I can then rest, right? And I'm only going to do it if I can leave my trailer in my spot. See what I mean? Because what I'm not going to do is put it in the shop that day. Then by the time they fix it, truck stop's full. Meanwhile, I got there when there were spaces. So now it's just, hey, Benton, go figure out where to park your rig. And Benton can't sleep. Benton can't just invent a parking spot like these foreigners do, and a lot of American drivers do, and then just go to sleep. And if somebody knocks on the rig and says, hey, man, you can't park here because it's not a parking spot, then I just move the rig. I can't go to sleep because all I can think is, hey, they're about to knock on the truck and tell me to move. I can't go to sleep under those circumstances. Not possible. The high vigilance kicks in, see. So, but it's just expected that for no pay, I will do all of these things, right? And in order to compete with the Durkas, that's part of why that's expected. Because they're just all they care about is keeping working, even if they're not being paid for it. And what they do is a lot of times they run 3 of these Durkas to a truck, and each one of them's license says no name Durka number 26, number 30, and number 39. And, you know, they keep a logbook, but they got 3 drivers. So, you know, the truck just fucking never stops. You know, the truck just runs 24/7. You know, that's your automated truck is actually, it's your AI self-driving truck, actually Indians. Meanwhile, Benton is expected to follow all the regulations. Benton is going to get, you know, ticky-tack. You know, if I get inspected, I'm going to get ticky-tack, you know, oh, I've been placed out of service multiple times for things that wasn't my fault. And here's what out of service looks like. Park at a way station and wait for the road service to show up and fix this thing, and you can't legally leave until they fix it. A mechanic has to sign off on this, right? But then we see the condition of the Durka trucks, you know, held together with duct tape and baling wire. So somehow the system knows not to inspect those trucks. Somehow the system knows to just, those wheels keep rolling, right? Meanwhile, Benton got pulled in for inspection in New Mexico 6 times in less than 6 weeks. This is not possible statistically. It's because what happened was, in order to maintain their certification, the DOT people at the chicken coops, you know, the weigh stations, they have to do a certain number of inspections. Well, they're not inspecting the Durkas, and even if they did, are they really going to want to do all the paperwork on the 100 different violations? Because these trucks have 100 violations. My truck, they're probably not going to find a violation. Right now, if they just want to find something, they can always find something. But so what happens is Benton, whose Easy Pass, his you know, whatever they call it, the thing that lets me bypass the all of the weigh stations, or some of them, for something was wrong with it. So I was having to drive into the point of entry in New Mexico, and those motherfuckers inspected me every time I pulled in. It was 2 a.m. they were inspecting me. It happened every single time. So after I had 4 inspections in like 3 weeks, I talked my way out of the last 2 because I said, "Hey man, are y'all just going to inspect me every time I come here?" And they're like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, this is going to be the 5th one in like less than 4 weeks." And then they're like, "Well, it's totally random." I'm like, "Well, clearly not. It can't be random. What it is they're eyeballing the truck, and they're like, oh, that looks like a white guy who's on top of his shit. So let's pull him in, and he's probably all good to go." Meanwhile, this is nerve-wracking. It delays whatever I'm doing. It's nerve-wracking. And then if somebody just decides they don't like the cut of my jib, well, now you're out of service. See? Yeah, you're just out of service, waiting, stuck like Chuck. Or maybe their cousin works for the local road service, right? And, oh, well, you know, it's going to most likely be their cousin come out here and make $1,000 or whatever to come out here. See what I'm saying? And none of this really ever applies to the foreigners. And people say, oh, it shouldn't be that way and something's got to be done. No, it's this way on purpose. It's this way on purpose, folks, to maximally torture the American citizens who will tolerate any and all levels of torture. You know, why would I want to participate in that society? Why would I want to be productive for that society? You know, why? And it does create a moral hazard, which is, hey, if it doesn't work for me, why would I do it? I would have to be insane to go drive a truck right now. Well, you know, maybe I would. But at this point, the move seems to be to do what? To live more like the Durka, not getting paid. Meaning, I'm now starting to hear that a lot of these companies are refusing, the ones who hire drivers like me who have experience and a clean record, they're hiring people like me, but they're not paying mileage. They're paying a percentage of the load, right? Well, the rates are so bad that when the driver runs the numbers, now you got experienced drivers with clean records that are, once they run the numbers, they're driving for like 40 cents a mile. Well, I think I started at 36 or 38. I want to say 38, and then they had me up to like 43 within like 6 weeks to 2 months because I was doing a halfway decent job. Max 3 months. They bumped me up. So now you've got experienced drivers with an unblemished record making about what I made as an inexperienced driver. But they're getting more for their money because they're getting an experienced driver who knows how to do the job and does it well, right? So you tell me, why would anybody even do the job? Meanwhile, I would happily be living in a big rig right now, driving a truck, if the proper conditions existed. And I'm willing to do it for low pay. I'm still willing to do it for low pay, right? So at a certain point, now it's like, who's going to live on the road and live in a truck and, you know, average $600 a week after taxes? What's going to be people like me who's like, well, fuck it. I'm, sleeping in a car trying to figure it the fuck out from a financial standpoint. Might as well live in a truck, drive it around, sit at the truck stop half the week, drive the truck around the other half of the week, and working for some big company and averaging 1,800 miles a week. Who cares? What's the difference? In fact, at that point, I'd prefer it because it's enough money to eat on, at least for now. I can still buy my nutritional supplements and, pay for the StreamYard if that's what I was into, right? And, you know, have multiple phones and be able to afford to have a second phone just for all the bullshit tracking they want us, all this bullshit apps they want us to put on these phones. This last company had to put WhatsApp on my phone. I don't use WhatsApp. WhatsApp is a nightmare on a phone battery. It's just a nightmare all the way around to somebody who's not interested in using WhatsApp, right? And driver facing camera with AI technology, observing what I'm doing, observing what I'm looking at, observing my activities, and disembodied female voice telling me to slow down. Then the truck went 75 miles an hour, which, hey, that's great, except um, the company's decided that in order to maintain their insurance, their lower insurance premiums, that, you know, this is being done in part by, they've agreed to install these driver facing cameras, and then now it's being sent. Now the insurance company has direct access to all this data, and it's like, hey, you got these drivers who are speeding, except, yeah, but our driver has no speeding tickets. So clearly he knows how to speed, right? Um, and even means it so much that he's speeding while a voice is telling him to slow down the entire time, right? So he's already reduced his speeding just on being nagged by a female voice, right? And then the company, here's how diabolical people, and I used to use that phrase, that term diabolical, but now it's in vogue somehow. So, but either way, um, now the guy that hired me, the safety manager, um, I had an annual inspection on my tractor, my company issued tractor, and he hooked a laptop up to it and turned the speed of the truck down and didn't even tell me, right? And so and he's a former driver and loved to talk about how he's a driver. And finally on the phone, I said, "Well, you used to be. Well, you're not. You used to be a driver. You're not a driver. You used to be a driver." But his thing, he's just got this old school mentality, and kind of trying to micromanage and sort of bully and boss around the truck drivers. And a lot of truck drivers they respond to being bullied and pushed around. You know, um, this is what I mean by the how horrible the industry is, right? And just again, powerless. My only power is, when I get back to the terminal, is to clean the truck out and quit the job and just hope they don't report a bunch of bullshit to my DAC report, which a lot of companies don't use DAC, but a lot do. It's just like database. They can, if I do bad shit from the companies, like let's say I quit at a truck stop and just left their equipment at a truck stop somewhere, well, now they got to pay thousands of dollars to go get somebody to pick that truck up. Right, or at least just the hassle of figuring it out, or maybe it gets towed because it took them too long to get back to it. That's happened. I dropped a trailer one time and told the company where I dropped it, and it sat there for months and months and months until finally it got towed out of there, and then they called me up all mad as if it was my fault. So the same people who will sit in an office and expect all kind of crazy shit for me to jump through all kind of flaming hoops, when it's on them, will just forget that I told them that there was a trailer dropped at this truck stop, and eventually the truck stop's going to be like, hey, that thing's been here for 3 months, and tow it out of there. And now it's thousands and thousands of dollars to get it back out of impound, right? And they didn't even know, even though I told them. And thank God I still had the text messages where I could prove I told them. You know, who would want to deal with that, right? And then the cope or the bright siding of everything is to say, well, but it's going to change, or it doesn't have to be that way, or well, that was just a bad company and you could go to it. No, they're all bad. They're all bad companies. The driver picks their poison. See, they're all bad companies. So you have a person right now with a clean drive, a clean record, a valid DOT medical card, a valid CDL, who absolutely could, after 30 days of not partaking in cannabis, could immediately get a job driving a truck who's sleeping in a car parked on the streets of Los Angeles. That's America, folks. So please defend the indefensible. That's indefensible, but please go ahead and defend it. And how they'll defend it is saying, well, he should just go put up with it anyway. Well, Americans, there might be no end to what Americans collectively will tolerate. There's old Benton here there's a whole lot of bullshit old Benton ain't going for. Old Benton has gone up to a window at a shipper office and been treated like a piece of subhuman garbage and just told the lady, hey lady, and waited in line to get treated like a subhuman piece of garbage, and assuming that the 10 fellas in front of me in line were treated like subhuman pieces of garbage, and then to say, hey lady, I understand that the 10 guys that came up here before me were willing to tolerate how you're talking to me. I'm not. I said, you can't talk to me that way, and just made her deal with it, right? You can't talk to me that way. I don't know what to tell you. And see, in a vacuum, that's respectable. See, people respect that. They don't respect the fact that there was 10 people here who let themselves get treated like pieces of trash. So much so that, and now why did those people let themselves get treated like trash? Because that facility was using Western Express as their in-house carrier. And those are all Western Express drivers who are mostly just out of prison. And they're so happy to not be in the prison, and they're driving around earning a paycheck, mostly black guys, and they've been through a system in order to even get out on parole or get out on probation, to even maneuver through the fucking correctional system. They've eaten a lot of shit, see? So now here they are, and some mean old white lady's talking to them like trash. Well, it's neither here nor there to them, because they're supporting their families and earning a paycheck and not going back to prison, hopefully. Right. Well, the fact that they're willing to tolerate bad treatment doesn't mean that I am. Except people will say, oh, well, you have a duty to produce for society. Bullshit. If I have a duty to go out here and earn money and pay taxes and be productive for society, society has all sorts of obligations towards me, and it's meeting none of them. It's meeting none of what should be its obligations towards me. Why would I be insane enough to disrespect myself? How can I look myself in the mirror when I'm treating myself disrespectfully? See what I'm saying? See how all of this must be reconciled? Who reconciles it, though? Who reconciles this? The reconciliation is, well, you got to earn a living, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. No, I don't. Other than basic bodily functions, the list of things that old Benton here has to do is live and die. That's it. That's it, folks. Benton ain't got to do nothing but live and die. So what you going to tell me about it? Not much. How long have we been doing this? I can't even, almost 2 hours. Goodness gracious, I had a lot to say today. All right, we're out, mainly to maintain the data plan to get to the end of the month. Thanks for listening. Bye.